Cory Robin here. Cory Robin here. Cory Robin here, your noble bush plane extravaganza pilot love. Okay, so for taking off, it's downhill, so you take off pretty quick. No big deal. Just let the airplane fly itself off. Boing, boing, boing. I'll put in a notch of flaps and leave a notch of flaps in. Do a max angle of climb. We'll climb right over this ridge here. Get on the other side of the island into the sunlight where it's a little warmer. Season 1, Episode 1.
I'm Cory Robin. Ride along with me and the Flying Cowboys as we take you flying into the backcountry where there's no runway required.
Let's go flying. Boom!
I'm Cory Robin. I find people who have never been in a small airplane before and give them a ride. This is Fly With Me Friday.
All right, on this one, we're going to do a little bit different.
Hi, I'm Riley Robin, and today I'm going to take over my dad's channel. We're going to go camping in Ghost.
Holy crap. You're a madman. Did you know you could carry your pants out and then put all your back on?
I have an opportunity to walk around Alaska without any pants on. I'm taking it.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to SocialFlight Live. I'm Jeff Simon. We have a fantastic evening for you. We've kicked off this program. Flying is coming back. That's the great news about it, with all sorts of things opening up in different parts of the country as the crisis slowly abates a little bit. It's been just wonderful to see things open up. Just in our neighborhood, in our neck of the woods here outside Boston, as of Monday, flight schools have opened up. They have, at least the one that we've been dealing with, has really good procedures for cleaning aircraft and transitioning back and forth between the students and the renters. I know that one of my sons, Jake, that is getting ready for his check ride and was just about to take his check ride before this all started, is picking that right back up. He'll be flying tomorrow and getting to his license as quickly as possible. And with that, what I'd like to do is share this image here, which is our aviation social distancing, stay one propeller apart. And I would like to encourage anyone with any organization, club, or EA chapter that you work with, if you'd in any way like to use this image, just email us. And even if you send us your logo, we'll add it to this and you can use it as well, because we want to spread the word to support flying, to get people back in the air using safe social distancing so that we don't have another a recurrence of the crisis so that we can keep this on a positive track and keep supporting general aviation. With that, I'd like to jump to our next thing, which is our program of takeoffs for takeout. And takeoffs for takeout was designed from the very beginning of this crisis to support general aviation businesses and to make it, so let me just make sure that's all active, to make it so that we can support those businesses that are so vulnerable in times like this and help both restaurants stay open through takeout practices as well as FBOs, pilot shops, pretty much everything. And it's been really fascinating during my own travels to see how well our world has adapted to this, whether it be paying using credit cards for everything in advance, whether it be your food or your fuel, and everything being contactless, watching how the FBOs have instituted procedures to clean things. It really has changed our world, and I think done it in a very positive way that will help reduce any chance of transmission and making things worse. And so during that, of course, we've had this competition, and I'd like to announce an entry here. Damon and Dana Overbo and their dog Heed from Springfield, Missouri, Lake of the Ozarks, who did this really fascinating flight. And Damon sent me this story of his flight, which was really fascinating. They took off in their plane, and they decided they were going to go and support a local restaurant that was Mexican and had all sorts of fantastic Mexican food there. They flew there, and en route, one of the things they were able to do is see this wonderful sunset. And on their way back, they were able to see an amazing fire that was actually happening. And those are contrails that you can see in the back in that picture. Well, while they were on the ground at that destination, another pilot showed up, and what he had expressed is that he had landed as thinking that the FBO was going to be open for fuel, and there was no fuel. And so as he was kind of debating, this other pilot, what he should do and whether he was going to take off with minimum fuel, Damon certainly thought that was not going to be a good idea. And the other problem was this pilot's cell phone battery had run out, and so he had no way to communicate as well. Damon and his wife helped out. They were fortunately able to get the airport manager through an emergency line to come over. They got it open, they got this guy fueled. So there was no accident chain to happen. The accident chain was broken by breaking the link of even having to make that hard decision of, do you take off with minimum fuel to hop to another airport? We all know that can show up and become a problem down there. It's not a risk worth taking. And so was really, really impressed at the way that all worked, as well as supporting local restaurants and our Takeoffs for Takeout program. And so because of that, I hope Damon's listening tonight. We'll certainly reach out to him directly, but he is the winner of this actual version of Takeoffs for Takeout. Damon has won a Lightspeed Aviation Zulu 3 ANR headset. It's an absolutely fantastic headset. Very, very excited for Damon and Dana Overbo. So, with no more ado, I would like to introduce our featured guest of the evening, Cory Robin. He is an aviator, creator, Flying Cowboy, the founder of the Flying Cowboys, if you've seen this. He's from Salt Lake City, Utah. His aircraft is known as Ghost. It's a home-built Cub Crafters Carbon Cub EX, flown to Alaska, the Bahamas, Mexico, all over the United States, with 4,002 hours in bush-type aircraft, and being the 2015 winner of the High Sierra STOL Drag World Champion, and founder, of course, as I said, of the Flying Cowboys. You can find Cory Robin out there on YouTube, all over the internet, or traveling. Cory, welcome to SocialFlight Live.
Thanks for having me. I'm a little bit nervous. There's a lot of people online. I'm watching these numbers tick up. I'm like, oh my gosh, I hope I'm a good ambassador for all the people that love bush flying and backcountry as much as I do.
Cory, you're here because you are an ambassador for that, and also for everything general aviation. And that's why I thought it would be such a great opportunity just to get together this evening. You know, this whole program's all about helping pilots through the crisis and inspiring people to participate in general aviation, to keep your spirits up and fly as much as you can. But it's also all been about education. And I have to say, I am so absolutely enthralled with the videos that you do and some of the amazing places that you fly.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, first, before we really get into that, I want to thank you. I've really followed a lot of your live streams, and whether it be Jack Pelton or really any of your guests that you've had on, it's been an amazing release for me, or to escape, or whatever you want to call it. So I want to really thank you for doing these videos and this series. It's off the chart amazing, and I think you and I have a lot of commonality in our general aviation promotion desire. And so thanks for doing this. It's really awesome to see all the content that you're pumping out. And but with that said, yeah, I do have fun in my bush plane.
So let's go back. Tell me a little bit about how you evolved your kind of aviation life story. I know you run an aviation-based company for airlines, essentially. Tell me a little bit about that, and tell me how that story came about to get you into this particular segment of flying, before we teach people a little bit about what's involved for themselves.
Gosh, I've done a lot of different types of flying, whether it be for, flying warbirds for commemorative Air Force. When I was a young, crazy teenage pilot, I had a Pitts S1S, and in fact, I competed at one of the very last aerobatic competitions at Fond du Lac, Wisconsin. I don't know if any of the old timers remember the granddaddies of aerobatic competitions. I was never any good at it because I didn't have time to practice, because I was going to college and trying to figure my life out. But I really enjoyed the challenge of the stick and rudder flying. And so it's no mistake, or it's not surprising to me that I've kind of stayed to that. And backcountry flying is really seat of your pants, flying by feel, and stick and rudder. It takes you back to those fundamental skills that you learn when you're taking your private pilot courses. Turns around a point, terrain flying, just all the basic skills. Now we've amplified those, and we've taken them kind of to the extreme with STOL and with backcountry and landing in ridges or in canyons or whatever the case may be. But really, there's no magic or mysticism or crazy amounts of piloting skill you need to get involved in backcountry. I think one of the reasons why I really connect with it myself is I've always been kind of really into being outside and being one with nature, whether it be when I was a kid and I was a professional cowboy for a couple of years, and I think
you were a professional cowboy for a couple of years.
Yeah, I ran cattle. Basically, you move cattle from one grazing area to another grazing area, and you monitor the health of the animals, and you're outside all the time. You sleep under the stars 300 days out of the year, whether it be winter or whether it be summer. You're just outside all the time, and so I've getting into the backcountry flying was just natural for me because I just loved being outside.
That's fantastic. So let's talk a little bit about your aircraft that you've kind of evolved to. I mean, you rattled off an awful lot of aircraft like they were nothing, but certainly you evolved from the Pitts world. Now, did I see prior to Ghost, you had a Wilga?
I did. I had a PZL Wilga 35. Now, everybody knows the Draco Wilga, which is Mike Patey's turbine-powered, fire-breathing monster. Well, mine was completely different than that. And it was the radial engine version, and it started off pretty stock when I purchased it, and I went through 2 engine changes with it, and ultimately ended up with about 400 horsepower on the nose. But it by no means was a Draco. But it was an okay backcountry airplane. It had its quirks. People would often ask me, how does the Wilga fly? Because it's such a different and unique airplane. And I said, well, about the way it looks. It flies a little bit different, has its quirks, it has its personality, but I really did fall in love with the Wilga. In fact, Mike Patey and I, we're kind of Wilga brothers in that, he had a Wilga, and then I had a Wilga, and then he got a Wilga. And so, we just, we really love the aircraft, and it's a great airplane. It's just different and unique, and it's got a great ramp presence, and just super fun airplane.
I like how you talk about such a completely unique and almost outrageous aircraft as just the regular Wilga, because you're comparing that to Draco of all things. It's like Batman talking to Superman and saying like, hey, I'm just a normal guy. It's like, I can't fly.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
Yeah, but it's not like you see a Wilga at every airport.
No,
So,
you don't.
so let's talk about that for a minute. I mean, there's two sides, it seems, to all of this backcountry flying and STOL competitions and everything. One of them, of course, is the aircraft, and the other is the pilot and what you're able to actually do with it. It seems to me, or let me actually ask that question instead of even supposing it. Is there a continuum? Can you approach backcountry flying starting with kind of just the more average aircraft before you get all the way up to having huge Tundra tires and modified aircraft slats and all sorts of things going on?
Yeah, you know, there's a, I don't know if it's a misconception or a stigma, but I do get these questions a lot. And really what my goal is through my videos, and maybe I can do a little bit better job at answering this question, but you really can get started in any aircraft. Really what backcountry flying comes down to is your fundamental skill set as a pilot, and it's not necessarily the aircraft that can get you started. I've seen people in the backcountry in all different types of stock certified aircraft, from Moonies to Pipers to Cessnas. So, and now we've just talked about the bread and butter of General Aviation. And so you can get started in really any aircraft. There are grass airports and dirt airports all over the country. In fact, gosh, I'll have to dig it up, but I published a listing of off airport, or not, basically non-paved airstrips. And there were somewhere in the neighborhood of about 2,000 non-paved airstrips that are FAA designated airports.
Really?
And so really what it comes down to when you're operating on a rough surface, or you're operating on a airport that is in a canyon, or whatever the case may be, is you've just got to be a little bit more brushed up on your pilotage, your flying skill, your ability to spot land, your ability to do a soft field, your ability to do a short field, your ability to do an obstacle clearance. These are all fundamental skills that you learn in your private pilot. There's no craziness or mysticism to it. In fact, backcountry airplanes predominantly are the easiest to fly airplanes. I fly a Super Cub. Doesn't get much easier than that. So to get started in backcountry flying and to get out there, really the best thing you can do is just focus on your skill set. Next time you're out practicing, set your standards a little bit differently. Maybe land on a spot instead of just kind of, oh, if I maintain center line, I'm okay. Maintain that center line, but hit a line.
Right.
And so now you're landing on a spot. You're also maintaining your discipline on your centerline control, and you can do that in any aircraft. And that is a skill that you can develop and hone and get to the point where you're very comfortable doing it. And then when you land on a goat trail or something on a ridge, you know, it's a little bit easier because you've worked your way up to it.
That makes a lot of sense, and obviously, you know, I'm going to have to talk to Jolie Lucas, our common friend, about using her Mooney in the backcountry. I'll see whether that becomes a separate thing. Go land on some ridge, but realistically, I mean, I think of like Paul Morrell, who's a SocialFlight team member that's got a kit fox, and they, you know, he can do all sorts of things with that at different levels. But what you mentioned there, and what I'm really hanging on, is that step by step working on your flying proficiency, so that you can kind of work your way up through different backcountry places that you can go. And so another thing that comes to mind is, you know, what it would seem that there's a level of this that mentorship really helps with, because you're not going to, you're going to places that are known to begin in when you're getting started, and you're going to places where someone's guiding you. And I've even seen it at your level, which obviously you're going, you know, really up to the expert level. During some of your videos, it shows, hey, you're following someone who's been there before. It's not, even at the expert level, it doesn't seem to be all about spotting something that no one's ever been to, doing a low pass to see if it's safe, and then going down.
Right, right. And you know, gosh, I don't even consider myself an expert. I'm learning something new every time I go out and fly. But, you know, really to break it down, the community is, I mean, General Aviation in general has such a special community. We're all there supporting each other. We all want to be safe. We all want to be proficient. But there is, I hate to say it, but there is something special about the backcountry aviation community, whether you're up in Alaska or you're in the West or you're in the Pacific Northwest or you're back east. There are backcountry pilots everywhere. Heck, I picked up my airplane when I first purchased it in upstate New York, and one of the first airplanes I saw next to it when it had small tires was a big 35 traditional Super Cub with big 35-inch bush wheels like I have on my airplane now. So you can find bush pilots everywhere.
Right.
And somebody's always willing to give you the advice or take you into a strip. But there's also a lot of designated airstrips that are really suitable for almost any aircraft. And you mentioned Jolie Lucas. She's got a nice M20 Mooney, and I've seen an M20 Mooney at Johnson Creek, Idaho several times. I've seen a Mitsubishi MU2 in there. I've seen all kinds of aircraft. But we're talking about it's like landing on a golfing fairway.
Right.
It's a 3,500 some odd foot long airport that sits at about 5,000 feet. And there is a little bit of canyon flying involved. But if you're comfortable landing your aircraft, you should be comfortable landing in the backcountry on a fairly novice strip. And so it really comes down to looking at what the procedures are, maybe watching a YouTube video or talking to somebody who's done it before. The best thing to do is to just get out there and do it in a safe manner. And there are even schools that will teach it. My good friend Kevin Quinn in Truckee, California has a backcountry focused flight school. In McCall, Idaho, McCall Aviation has a flight school. My buddy down in Nevada, CC Pocock, has Bush Air. He's got a flight school that focuses on backcountry. So if you want to take it to a level that is beyond your current capability and your current skill set, how do you do it? You practice. You get in an airplane and you do it. The best way to do that is with a competent instructor right there at your side, as with anything. And so that's what I always recommend people do. Focus on your fundamentals, get your core competencies down, get on the runway and practice those spot landings, maintaining directional control, heavy braking, soft fields, obstacle clearance, and then take it to the next level by getting a good instructor and then getting out there and doing it. It is so much fun, and I invite everybody to come and join the party.
Yeah, it's so fascinating, and again, I'm a huge fan of the videos and watching all the different adventures that you do with that. Now, tell me a little bit about it seems like you've got to combine both the command of the aircraft for the type of flying you're talking about, but most of this we're talking about the landing and the takeoff portion. But there's also a lot of mountain flying, of course. I mean, where you are, you're in the playground of all sorts of amazing places to go. Tell me a little bit about that aspect of the flying.
There's a course I took, gosh, I must have been 20 years old. It was, I think, when the FAA Wings program was brand new, and it was a mountain flying course at a local university here in the Salt Lake City area, because obviously we're surrounded by 11,000 foot peaks in all directions. So mountain flying is part of the course when it comes to learning how to fly here in the West. So, I obviously took the course, and you learn the basic things like mountain wave, reading wind direction, descending and rising air, turbulence, all kinds of things that can, if you really don't know how to read those types of conditions, it really can get dangerous really quickly. And it's not necessarily something you need to have a fear for. It's something you need to have a healthy respect for and good old-fashioned understanding.
Right.
As a backcountry pilot, it's rare to see a seasoned backcountry pilot flying in bad conditions. We typically will go flying early in the morning when the winds are calm and the air is a little bit thicker. And then in the afternoon when the winds kick up, we're around the campfire. We're around the barbecues, and we're hangar flying at that point, or backcountry hangar flying. I don't know, maybe we have to find a term for that. But,
campsite flying.
Yeah, but that's one of the things that I think I just think backcountry aviation makes you a better pilot all the way around. And I see people from all different types of aviation background, whether you're flying a premier jet in your full-time job, or you're an airline pilot, or you fly float planes. the skill set and the knowledge and learning how to do the mountain flying, learning how to read the weather at a little bit more advanced manner. Because a lot of the time you're landing off airport and there's no runway, there's no numbers on these little goat trails or little ridge tops. How do you find out which direction the wind is blowing? There's some fundamental skill sets that teach you how to do that, but also make better risk management type decisions. And, you know, is this the day for me to land on that spot that I've been kind of looking at? Because that's one thing you'll find about us backcountry pilots or STOL pilots is we're always looking for the next awesome spot to land. We're always hungry for that next landing or the next camping spot. And you kind of imagine, oh, I'm the only pilot that's ever landed here before. And then you see the old, you know, the old airmail arrows in the ground, and you're like, oh, no, somebody else did it. But
Yeah.
anyway,
Or
it's
I
just
think
a
I saw
lot
in
of
one
fun.
of your videos, you get there and then you find a couple airplane parts on the ground, and that's a little testament that someone's been there before.
Right? It really is. You know, I don't know that there's very much uncharted territory in the United States anymore, especially you know, where one of the skills that you need to develop as a backcountry pilot is knowing where it's legal to land. You know, there's a lot of public lands, there's a lot of private lands, there's a lot of gray area lands, which I tend to stay away from, but typically BLM land that's not designated as a wildlife refuge or study areas or whatever the case may be. A general rule of thumb for me is if other motor vehicles are allowed there, then most likely I'm okay to land there, but not all the time. Because I know that, you know, there's several backcountry pilots that looked at the charts, looked at the hunting apps, that, you know, we all fly around with different land ownership maps because, oh, that's a cool spot. Can I land there? So we're checking our little GPS apps. But, you know, it's you know, learning to read those conditions, learning how to do it legally, how to do it safely is really what it's all about. And, you know, staying within those safe boundaries makes it a lot more fun, especially when you're in a group of people with a diverse skill set.
Right.
You know, I lead a group of people to Oshkosh every year. I've been doing it since, gosh, I think the last 15 years. And we've had big years, we've had smaller years, and I've tried to keep it as small as possible because you know, you start doing flight planning for 20 different airplanes, it becomes unwieldy. But, you know, we're often landing all kinds of fun locations on sandbars and different things like that, and different skill sets. And so we try to set things up for the most novice pilot in the group so it's comfortable for everybody.
Right.
And you'll find that in the aviation or in the backcountry community is everybody wants everybody to be safe, but we all want to have fun.
Right. You know,
Yeah.
one of the things that I absolutely have always loved about aviation is that idea that we're combining community with this thirst for knowledge and proficiency, that we have this camaraderie, but we're also focused so much on perfecting our craft, which we never perfect. We just keep getting better and better and better if we're doing it, if that's our spirit. And that's what you've talked about, like the same things that you're talking about being on speed and all of that matters in all sorts of different conditions, whether you're in the backcountry or not. But obviously it matters a heck of a lot more when the stakes are high and you're alone and landing somewhere pretty far from the nearest other sign of humanity.
Yeah, that's true.
Tell me a little bit about Ghost. I mean, people obviously we're here because we love airplanes, and that's a hell of a plane. Have you made any changes? I mean, you built that from the kit yourself, correct?
No, it is a home build airplane. I did not build it from scratch. I've done lots of modifications, but a gentleman back east built it, and I picked it up basically as he was finishing up his fly off, his 40 hours.
Okay.
So I picked it up right at 40 hours. Picked it up. It is a Carbon Cub EX, so it was their very first revision of the Carbon Cub. It's my favorite version of the Carbon Cub. I know that they've made lots of changes and different tweaks and stuff for different, you know, with the EX3, it's more horsepower, constant speed propeller. With the EX2, it's lighter aileron control. But, you know, the EX to me is just my favorite version of it, and I've flown them all. And mostly probably because I've just customized it. It's like mine now. So I've got the big tires, I've got the big shocks on the thing. I've got a tail shock. I've even adjusted the washout on the wing so that the stall characteristics are how I like it. The VGs are relocated a little bit differently. I've got some tail modifications that I've done. So it is really a custom airplane that's really tailored to how I like an airplane to perform. I don't mind a little bit of a wing drop in a stall. And so I've taken that, in certified airplanes, they kind of tilt the wing tips downwards a little bit. Some as aggressive as a couple of degrees or 3 degrees in some aircraft designs. And I've taken a little bit of that out. And the whole purpose there is so that the wing tips stall last. And so you'll have a stall that kind of starts to develop in the root of the wing and then develops outward. And that really prevents a wing drop in the stall. I might be getting too technical, but
no, you're not.
How I like my airplane to stall is just a good clean break. And if I'm uncoordinated and that wing drops, well, that's my fault. That's because I was uncoordinated, and I don't mind that at all because I've become very, very comfortable with my aircraft. But we're talking about an airplane right now. I've got my airplane stalling right around 27 miles an hour. So wow. We're talking about airplanes that are super, super extreme. And mine's not even close to as extreme as some of the real pros. Like we're talking about Steve Henry and Hal Stockman, and you've got these real bush pilots up in Alaska. I mean, heck, all I do is make YouTube videos and I play around with it. I don't do it for a living. So my stuff is just purely for recreation, but you've got guys up in Alaska like 170 Mafia, that's a good crew up there, and you've got guys in California doing really extreme stuff. Mine's kind of more of a middle ground. I like to travel in it a lot. It's really just set up the way I like my airplane to fly. It's bush planes are so cool. I'm not a fan of any one design. I'm not any fan of one make or model. I'm not a purist. You have to have a tailwheel airplane in order to fly in the backcountry. Now they tend to do a little bit better because tailwheels take more punishment than nose gear. Typically in aircraft design, they're not designing a lot of nose gear airplanes for the backcountry, with the exception of the new Carbon Cub that has a nose wheel, and some of the Zeniths, and some of those that are designed for it.
What is it? The Katma? There's a crazy conversion with
the Katma. They put a crazy wing canard on there and do a big horsepower increase to handle that additional horsepower weight.
Huge nose wheel, an enormous nose wheel, a canard theoretically to help keep it up.
Yeah. And they're so proud of it. I love those airplanes. They sound so cool. That's I love being, when I'm in the backcountry camping and there's other pilots with me, one of my favorite things is listening to the Cessnas. The Cessna guys are the guys that want to wake up early in the morning and they're excited to fly out to breakfast. And then those prop tips on those MT propellers are going supersonic because they all have to have an MT propeller or a Macaulay. Those are the high performance ones, right? But they just have this unique sound to them that echoes off the canyon walls, and man, it is music to my ears. That's my time to get up out of the tent and get my own airplane started.
Wow. So how did you get to that point where or how do you get the knowledge to start making some of those changes that you've talked about? How much of it is it through community and people who own the same type of airplane and those groups? How much of it is other technology folks in the industry, or how much of it did you just come up with on your own?
I would love to say that I came up with any of it on my own, but I am not that guy. So really what it comes down to with my particular aircraft and the modifications that I've put on it is just being very observant to the guys that are really doing it. The guys doing these crazy 20-foot landing rolls at the Valdez STOL competition. And what are they doing with their Cub? Guys in Idaho, there's this master, his name is Toby Smith, or Toby Ashley, excuse me. Toby Smith's another one of my friends in Nevada. But Toby, he has a Carbon Cub, and he has that thing just absolutely dialed in. And so when he starts to talk, I just listen to understand. Because he actually won the Reno air races in Reno. We had STOL Drag at the Reno air races, which was, wow, we're racing bush planes head to head, drag race style at Reno. How cool is that?
Yeah.
But you know, for him to go up a guy like Steve Henry, who flies a Highlander, which is also heavily modified, Steve Henry can take that airplane off with the wheels locked. He's got so much horsepower. It's unbelievable. But, you know, watching guys like that modify their Carbon Cubs, and I just kind of take notes and mental notes and kind of figure it out, you know, and I'll ask them, what did this mod do? What was the result of that? And you'll find that a lot of the guys that are really, really into it, they really know their stuff.
Yeah.
Especially those guys up in Alaska that are doing it for a living, and they're not doing it to just have a great performing airplane or to do it for competition. They're hauling out 400 pounds of moose meat in a Super Cub with full fuel. And so you're talking about guys where they're flying and their life depends on it. And these are fantastic modifications. And then you know, then you rely on the manufacturing side of it. There is a big bush flying community, backcountry flying community, supported by companies like Airframes in Alaska, Acme Aero, Shock Monster Shocks, and these are guys that are out there innovating, building components for our aircraft, and really doing it. And they're the masters. You know, I'm just a guy that plays with my airplane and makes YouTube videos. I have no claim to being smart about any of it. You know, I can only tell you what I've done, but by no means am I a technical wizard. Like, you know, I'm not a Mike Patey, for example. That guy's
you're very, very humble, but let's talk about some of the stuff that you have done, because I'd like to let's start talking about the Flying Cowboys, and then we'll get into some of those events, including STOL Drag. So tell me a little bit about, you started the Flying Cowboys. What's it? And now you gave me a little bit of history that you were a cowboy. So that all of a sudden now we got a little piece going into place.
You know, I don't know if it's actually fair to say that I founded the Flying Cowboys. I think that, I don't know. Everybody kind of has their own Flying Cowboys origin story, and how the Utah guys got started is we do. You know, when I was a professional cowboy, I never really lost touch with the ranching community. And so whether you're in Southern Nevada, anywhere in Utah, Wyoming, I know almost all the cattle, you know, the beef producers. And so a couple times a year, me and the Patey brothers, Jason Sneed, Wally Brown, we would go out and help with Roundup. And so what Roundup is with this particular ranch is they really have two locations where they manage their herd, and one is on low terrain and one is on high terrain. And so twice a year they're moving the cattle from one location to another, and they have a whole slew of professional cowboys that they contract out for Roundup, because it's kind of a big operation to move, you know, 400, 500, 600 cows from one location to another. And you've got, you know, adolescents and baby cattle in there, along with the adults and the bulls, and there's all kinds of logistics. And it's not just moving the cattle, it's getting the cowboys where they need to be, and there's canyon flying involved, there's high ranch, there's low ranch, and so, you know, it just really depends. And so we kind of got the name Flying Cowboys by just doing volunteer work. We just do it for fun. We don't charge any money. It's just fun to go out and camp under the stars in a beautiful canyon and help out your neighbors, essentially. Yeah. And sometimes I'll get a call from one of these ranchers in the dead of winter, and they'll have me take pictures, or one of us, it depends on who's available, but we'll go take pictures of their ranch houses right on top of the mountain. I've flown bales of hay in my Super Cub and dropped them out in remote locations, or salt licks, or whatever needs to be flown. Sometimes I'll fly them up some pizzas because they're in such a remote location and it's like a 4-hour drive into town. And so I'll you know, ice cream and pizzas with dry ice and pizzas, and load my airplane up with pizzas for the guys. And it's just fun to give back. And since I have the right kind of airplane, it just became natural. And so right now there's 10 official Flying Cowboys and a bazillion unofficial Flying Cowboys. But that, you know, I guess that's my Flying Cowboys origin story. But I'm willing to bet that if you asked all 9 of the other ones, that they would all have their own story.
Which is totally okay.
Right. That's kind of the coolest thing, is that we found each other and we're really close friends. We all share common interests, and we all want to keep each other safe. And you know, it's a really fun group. And you know, lately we've kind of, you know, holy cow, the social media thing is a big deal. People want to know that this is different and new to a lot of people, this lifestyle that we have, flying bush planes and doing the, you know, a lot of people hear Flying Cowboys and they think, oh, they must be a bunch of rule breakers or you know, whatever that is. But you know, we're really, when it comes down to it, if you watch our videos or you get to know us, we're just a bunch of average guys doing things that we think is normal, but other people don't. And so I think that's more or less why it has caught on.
Right. Well, I think you know, every great organization has a little bit of mystery to their origin story. So that's all that's all good no matter what. And now you've also evolved though to have a lot of you know, fly-ins and different types of things that you're doing. Now that there's the High Sierra one, the one that happens at Dead Cow, and then the STOL Drags, which is crazy stuff. So tell me a little bit about the events that happen.
Well, both of those events are the brainchild of the legendary Kevin Quinn. Now, here's a guy who comes from a professional hockey player background. No joke, he was a professional hockey player. And then he got out of that, and then he became a professional ski guide, and then that kind of evolved into heli skiing, and he became one of the most prolific and largest heli ski operators in Alaska.
Oh my God.
And so being involved in Alaska, almost everybody in Alaska is a pilot. I don't know what the number is, but I think it's like, I don't know, 20% of everybody in Alaska is a pilot, you know, 1 out of 5. And so you know, he's obviously been a pilot for a dang long time, at least as long as I've known him, because that's how I met him. But I think I started attending High Sierra Fly-In maybe in its 4th year, maybe 3rd year, I'm not quite sure. But it was back at a different location on a much smaller lake bed. And I was there for 3 years, and then we moved it to the big lake bed. But really, you know, the High Sierra Fly-In is a special backcountry event because it's on a lake bed, so all skill levels can fly there, all different types of aircraft. I mean, we had a jet come last year, a PC-24 Pilatus came for a few hours. We have seaplanes, we have Cessnas, we have you know, all kinds of different turboprops show up. And so, and you know, the lake bed is, I think it's 5.5, 6 miles long. But a group of guys in California, mostly Kevin and a small group of people, some of them are STOL Rats. No, there's a group called STOL Rats, coolest group of guys I know in California. But they have purchased a good portion of this lake bed, and they decided, hey, let's have our own fly-in, because there really isn't a fly-in that really caters to all skill levels, that's a backcountry focused, family friendly fly-in. And then here comes Kevin saying, okay, now we have this fly-in, we've got several hundred people showing up, we have the space. And he starts to think to himself, and I've heard him tell this story, he's just kind of sitting around. I even think he said he was on the toilet, and he's like, how can we this is kind of how it works with the Flying Cowboys. We're just on our we put on our thinking hat. No, but it's a great story. You should really have Kevin on. He's just a fantastic guy. But anyway, he thought, well, how do we take STOL, which is a short takeoff and landing competition, and how do we take that to the next level? Because it's really cool as it is, but we have this dry lake bed. I wonder if we could race airplanes. And so he kind of refined the idea over the course of several years, and I think we had our first official race in 2015, and we've had it every year at High Sierra ever since. And I know he'd worked for years and years and got it, you know, approved at Reno, and 16 pilots flew there, or 15 pilots flew there last year at Reno as a demo, and now we became a official race class at the Reno Air Races. And now there's event venues all over the country and really all over the world that have taken a look at what they've done at the Reno Air Races and High Sierra Fly-In, and they're starting to think, maybe we can do this here at our little airport or our little fly.
Back up for people. What is STOL Drag? Like explain the race to me.
Okay, so yeah, I apologize. I should tell you what STOL Drag is. So you basically take 2 aircraft and you line them up on a line, just like you would on a single aircraft on a STOL competition, and they take off and the course length is 2,000 feet long. And some venues it might be longer or shorter, but a rule of thumb is about a 2,000 foot long course if you want to set up your own course and practice. So set up a course, you're flying 2 aircraft head to head, you take off, and then that 2,000 foot line, you land on or after that line. So now you're a STOL competitor. You come to a complete stop on heading. Any differentiation or offset in your heading is a disqualification. And so you've got to stop on heading, complete stop with your tail wheel down, and then you turn around, take off again. Now that start line that you started at becomes kind of a finish line. You land on or after that line. So now you've taken off, you've landed, you've turned around, you've come back, you land on or after a line, you come to a complete stop on heading. The first aircraft that comes to a complete stop on heading wins. And so it's a head-to-head competition. In qualifiers, if you have enough airplanes and you want to run like a qualifier round, you can do timed heats. So you can really race very diverse aircraft and just get a lot done through the race.
Mhm.
And then you can find your top 16 and then do a bracket system. That's really how they do it at Reno and High Sierra, is anybody can race during qualifiers and they'll just put anybody up side by side. And it doesn't really matter who wins when you're doing the qualifier runs. Your time is what matters. And so you want to just put in a really good time.
Now, do you try to get airborne as quickly as you can, or it almost, with only 2,000 feet, I'm thinking like, do they keep their wheels on the ground basically for those 2,000 feet, or what? How is it that you minimize that?
So STOL airplanes typically will take off in 200 feet-ish, plus or minus. The ground is drag, so you do not want to be on the ground. You want to get into the air as quickly as possible and get your airplane cleaned up. And so, you know, when you see STOL competitors, or, you know, maybe I should do a video, or Kevin, do a video, do a STOL drag training video. But, you know, you take off, you want to get in the air as quick as possible, because the ground and your bearings and your brakes and everything is drag. You want to get the airplane as clean as possible, so you get your flaps retracted and everything as clean as possible. And then about maybe halfway down the course, you're at 1,000 feet. You're approaching, most of the fast competitors are approaching 110 miles an hour in only 1,000 feet. So it's a fast race. And then it becomes an exercise in energy management. So a lot of the pilots will kick their aircraft into a slip, exposing as much of the airframe into the wind as possible. So now instead of accelerating, you're trying to decelerate as quickly as possible and get into landing configuration. So you're dumping your flaps, you're putting your feet out, you're putting out parachutes. No, I'm kidding. But you're trying to dirty up the airplane as much as possible to then slow the airplane down so you can land on or after that line pretty much at stall speed, so that you can get stopped as quickly as possible, get the airplane turned around and do it again.
Wow.
So one of the coolest things I think about STOL drag is that none of those things that I just mentioned are mystical, magical pilotage powers. These are all basic skills: taking off, getting the airplane cleaned up, a forward slip, getting the flaps out, a spot landing, maintaining directional control and discipline, stopping on heading, turning around and doing it again. Those are all basic skills. Now, they're just performed at a higher level of competency, but just like anything else, it's something you can practice and get into. And so that's one of the things that I think is so much fun watching STOL drag. And, you know, you can get on YouTube and see lots and lots of videos of these airplanes doing these drag races. And you're looking at it and you're thinking, oh my gosh, as a pilot, can I do that in my 172? You bet. We have 172s that make the Sweet 16 at High Sierra Flying.
Wow.
It just really comes down to, are you competent in your aircraft, and can you master that airframe around you and wear it like you're putting on gloves?
Wow. Wow.
But you know, it's a wonderful concept. I think it's going to continue to grow and be an amazing part of our aviation community. I hope to see it at all the big events. You know, I don't want to mention any names, but Oshkosh and Sun and Fun would be really kind of cool venues, I think, because I go to those every year. And you know, as a fan of aviation, you know, I know I'm kind of a backcountry insider, but as just a fan of aviation, I'd really love to see it for selfish reasons, because it's just so much fun. And one of the things that I've seen is it's starting to ignite the passion in guys that are flying normal airplanes they're kind of like, I'm kind of tired of the $100 hamburger thing. What am I going to do with my airplane now? Well, now you have a reason to develop your fundamental skill set again,
Right.
because and then you're making it fun. Just this last weekend up in Alaska, there was a fly-in and they drag raced their airplanes.
Wow.
How cool is that?
Yeah, that is so cool. And I'm with you. I hope that they do expand out and have some of that. And it's interesting because even when I look at my own background in aviation, my interest area has evolved through all that time of like, what is it that I used to gravitate towards during the big fly-ins or get really excited about, and really has changed quite a bit. And right now it very sincerely is getting over, and same with my boys, getting over to the LSA and the STOL stuff that's going on, because it's so grassroots and it's so stick and rudder, pure kind of based. And it also seems to have this this variety to it, where I can imagine that if I got into that and got proficient in one, I would want to keep trying different airplanes. Like the flavor of the week. It's kind of how like you start to see in the motorcycle world how people get one, but then all of a sudden, poof, they've got 12. And there seems to be a reason for that. It's not just separate missions. It's everyone's a little bit different. And I mean, you've flown a lot of different planes. If you were to take and say Ghost is not allowed to be on your winner list, what are some of the most fun planes that you have flown that are in this category?
Ooh. Oh my gosh.
That's a tough one.
If I couldn't own a Carbon Cub.
I said, we already know, because that's the one you
Super Cubs
own,
off?
right?
There's no Super Cubs? Okay, no Super Cubs at all of any flavor, because I'm thinking, man, that SQ12 is pretty sweet, but it's a Super Cub. Okay,
let's start talking Kit Foxes and Highlanders and
right. I'll be honest with you, it would probably be a Highlander or a Kit Fox. Those are some awesome airplanes. I really enjoy the tandem seat aspect of the Cub, because I like being able, for me it's a visibility thing. I like that cockpit. I like being on center line, and I like being able to look and see both tires. In a Kit Fox or a Highlander, you're off center line. You're still flying a stick and rudder airplane, but you're a little bit off center line. Now, if you have a really cute girlfriend, like Jonas Marcinko, he's another YouTuber who's got a really cute girlfriend, and he sits her right next to him. And if you want to sit next to somebody, those side-by-sides are fantastic airplanes. I got to tell you though, even the old certified airplanes, you're talking about like Clippers and Taylorcraft and Huskies, and
I think your answer to me is you can't. You're not coming up. Highlander's about the best we're in.
I'm really having a hard time, because airplanes are so cool. There's so many different things. You're hitting me at a vulnerable moment here, because now I'm starting to think my daughter in the next few years is going to be old enough to start taking flight lessons. And I think I might teach her in something like a pacer.
Interesting.
Because it's not necessarily the best STOL airplane, but it can do short, it can do backcountry, but it'll teach her, it's underpowered. And I think learning energy management, it's not necessarily, in my opinion, the best thing in the world to do is to jump into a super airplane like a Carbon Cub, for example, is a fantastic airplane. It's like the cream of the crop, or the Zlin models, or the Legend aircraft, or there's the backcountry Super Cubs. There's so many wonderful Super Cubs and backcountry airplanes, but they spoil you as a pilot.
Right.
And I've seen some pilots, and I'm not saying everybody's guilty of this, but sometimes they let the performance of the aircraft make up for bad piloting skills.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. When it comes down to my daughter, I want her to learn in an underpowered airplane, so she has to learn to appreciate the high performance airplanes. Excellent. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but to me that really strikes and hits home. And I think the Pacer is a good middle of the road, like not a modified Pacer like you see up in Alaska with big bush wheels on it and VGs and high horsepower. I'm talking a stock Pacer with the short short wing, and something where here in Utah in the summer we're looking at 9,000 foot density altitudes at my home airport. And so you're taking off and doing touch and goes and climbing at 150, 200 feet a minute and earning those landings.
Wow.
You're learning about energy management. You're learning about mountain wave and where to fly and where not to fly, because your life literally does depend on it in these planes that are not built for the backcountry. So it'll teach her really good skills that I think she'll have a healthy respect for reading conditions and knowing aircraft performance. I can't tell you that I've ever really looked at a performance chart in the Carbon Cub, because I know that thing can just rip off the ground and climb, like my buddy Kevin says, the homesick angel. I mean, you just rip off the ground and start climbing at 1,700 feet a minute, fully loaded, and that's really spoiling me as a pilot.
Right.
So long story short, I'd probably, if I was to purchase another airplane today and it was for that purpose, it would probably be a Pacer.
That's very interesting. Yeah, I think we saw a couple STOL equipped planes show up at our local airport, and one of them was a tri-pacer that had been converted to being essentially a pacer, and then of course they put big tires on it and everything else.
Oh, cool.
But you've got a really, really good point, and as another kind of father of a student that's learning, and then Ben also will be getting started shortly with his flight training, it's true. You want to learn the basics. You want to understand, you want to feel stick and rudder importance. You want to understand density, altitude, airport length. You don't want to be in anything dangerous, but you want to have some appreciation of it. And when we have higher end aircraft, whether it be your Carbon Cub with all sorts of power and modifications that can do amazing things, you probably can get a little lax on the low end. I know on our end we do a lot of traveling. We've got the Bonanza that we restored, and with a 300 horsepower engine, I mean, do you really need to do weight and balance? I mean, yes, you do, but how are we ever loading it anywhere near the edge of the weight and balance envelope? No. So you don't get that same feeling of what does it really mean to take off on a hot, humid, high density altitude day, because you don't want your child to figure that out for the first time alone.
Right. Yeah. And it to me, that's where it strikes home is and I kind of say that to, like, I get a lot of messages from people, what's the best airplane for me? And I start to ask them questions. Well, what is it? What's your current skill set? What's your background? I want to know if they already have an understanding of these basic skills, because the last thing I want to do is encourage somebody to get into something and then, they have some sort of failure. The airplane's hitting on 3 out of the 4 cylinders and it's running really rough, and you still have to climb out of that canyon or at least limp along long enough to land on a sandbar or an airport or whatever the case may be. It's definitely okay to learn in underperforming aircraft that are, and I'm using like the Carbon Cub or even your Titan T-51 with 350 horsepower on the front. That's a high performance aircraft. And so you're really just taking it back to basics, and there's nothing wrong with that in my mind. I have a healthy respect for, I don't know, I just love all airplanes, and I think that, I think I've said it. I think you just want to learn and learn all the things. And don't just learn, whipping that throttle forward and 2.5 seconds later you're off the ground and you've taken off in 78 feet like we do in the Oshkosh STOL demo.
Right.
There's a lot of things that get you to that level of competency and trust with your equipment and trust with the conditions. A lot of the times we're landing there in a 15-mile-an-hour crosswind that on the books exceed a lot of the crosswind component of those aircraft that we're flying. And how are we able to do that? Well, we're using our backcountry techniques. We're flying into the wing. We're flying into the wind. We're using the crab angles. That grass strip at Oshkosh is nice and wide. So even though it's a 15-mile-an-hour or not crosswind component that exceeds the Piper Cub's capabilities, well, we're cheating a little bit because we know what we're doing. And so it's those little things, those skill sets you learn as a pilot that you can't learn by just shortcutting. You pay the price, you go through the process, you acquire the skill, and then you do the fun stuff.
Yeah, and it makes sense. As it's been said over and over and over that good pilots are always learning, and that's what this is all about, because the learning is also the exploring and expanding into all these fascinating areas. And it's so cool to hear it. I hope that when I'm able to get the bush wheels on the Mustang, which is already in my head, I'm thinking like, yeah, we can disable the gear. I can find a way to put big tires on that. Hold on a second, boys. Let's see. Like we can make it happen for a trip out there. And I know we can show up at High Sierra in this thing. I know we can make that happen.
Well, no, with your stock small tires, just show up at High Sierra, and then we'll load all you guys up into, I guess it's only a 2-seater, huh? You'll bring the Bonanza to High Sierra with your whole family, and we'll put all of you guys in bush planes, and then we'll go have fun in the backcountry.
You know what? We'll have at least 1 or 2 other licensees in the family by that point, so both planes will come out there, and then I want to get in and see what some real STOL flying is doing that with you. Really fantastic. Cory Robin, thank you so much for joining us tonight on SocialFlight Live. I really do appreciate it. I would love to do some more work with you in the future. For everyone who is joining us, you can see more of Cory Robin at coryrobin.com and also on his YouTube channel. Be sure to subscribe to it. A quick search on Flying Cowboys, Cory Robin, will get you everything that you need to know, and there is just so many cool videos out there. And so again, thank you so much, Cory. I really appreciate you joining us tonight.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me. It's awesome. It's an honor.
So for everyone else, we will be back with more exciting things. You know, we talked about mountain flying. Well, let's see. June 16th, Kirby Chambliss, aerobatic champion and Red Bull race champion, will be joining us. That is next Tuesday night at 8 p.m. On June 23rd, we have Mike Bush coming back. Going to be a great night. We're going to talk all about analytics from engine monitoring and predictive maintenance. It's a great way to manage your aircraft. I can say that as an A&P and IA. I am fascinated with the work that Mike Bush does. That'll be an exciting night on June 23rd. June 30th, we're going to have mountain flying night with Colinaro and some other folks that are going to come on and learn those exact types of techniques. You'll come away learning a few things you need to know about mountain flying. Until next time, be sure to check out SocialFlight.com and the free SocialFlight mobile apps. And please, be safe, fly safe, keep flying. Blue skies. Good night.